Is it the mass, which is the housing blocks, or the void, the common open spaces? Or in this case, which is the mass being the space within the unit, or the balcony being the voids? How many of you say that the mass came first? You can just raise your hand if you think the mass came first. Okay. And how many think the voids came first? Alright. So as most of you agreed that the mass came first, especially in today's housing societies, it is the mass that has come first, and the voids are almost like the end results of these masses. Even if as architects we think we are so engrossed in making the building that we often forget what these voids are. Today, let's address these voids. What are they? What are these open spaces? To call a space open, it includes certain spatial characteristics like any one of the side being open, its association with the ground or sky, or at times even the degree of openness make the space, decides whether the space is open or not. It is also the experiential characteristics and its association with nature, such as breeze, sunlight, rain, birds, etc. Or it can also be described by the behavioral characteristics, which are perceived from how people think what an open space is, how it is used, and what are the various activities associated with it. Now, most of us would have come across such advertisements or branding of developer-driven housing, where open spaces are often used as a selling point. But in reality, it is just provided to tick the checkbox or to fulfill the rules and regulations. Often they are large open spaces that are provided which has no sense of ownership. They are also not integrated with the housing masses and hence become leftover spaces. In some cases, even though the open space is provided, they are long and narrow voids which don't really serve the purpose both functionally and spatially. Or even if we look at the private open spaces such as the balconies which is provided, they also become leftover spaces because of the way they are just attached to the mass and not integrated with the activities of the house. No two balconies overlook each other to increase interactions. And in some houses, we can also see that they are often converted into small storage spaces or even workspaces. Let us look at what has already been done. How are these concerns being addressed by architects across the globe, and what are the various strategies that is used to create meaningful open spaces? In order to look deeper into the analysis, there are certain characteristics of open spaces that is being picked up, such as social interaction, connection between open spaces, location of the open space within the build, the level of privacy, association of it with the nature, the nature of the open space itself, whether it being open or closed, the volume being it single or double height space, and the integration of the open space with the number of spaces within the unit. If we look at the first example, Habitat 67, built by Moshe Safi in 1967, it breaks the typical form of the orthogonal high-rises by locating each unit a step back from its immediate neighbor. This stepping approach provided each apartment with a private open terrace, which also acted as roof gardens. Since these private open spaces are also located at the periphery of each unit, it allows social interaction to take place within the neighbors. If we compare Habitat 67 with Interlace in Singapore, it more or less has similar characteristics of Habitat 67, but the way it is approached is different. The regular masses was broken by shifting and rotating of the floor plates to create pockets of open spaces of different scales, volumes and characteristics. Furthermore, comparing it with Greenville by Zero Studio in Connecticut, Greenville is essentially a closed private balcony space which is more of an extension of the room in front. But the interesting characteristic here that comes out is that there is no physical door that separates the space. The experiential characteristics of the green, the light and the wind flowing into the room, and certain behavioral association of stone flooring and the metal chair, which is associated usually with the outdoor space, makes it look different from any other normal balcony. But in contrast, this in fact cuts away completely from the outside world and allows no scope for social interaction. Now then, the question to think about is, which one will we consider as open space? Is it the interlace or is it the greenway? We'll now look at few unconventional examples where the open spaces are interpreted differently. Mirador, built by NVDRB in Madrid. Here, the top floor circulation space stands out. The sectional lay of open to sky corridor with the private staircases of each unit are crisscrossing the public corridor, encouraging chance encounters and interaction. Similarly, La Muralla Roja by Ricardo Bofe, it has the characteristics of interlocking staircases, bridges and platforms. In both these scenarios, it is the circulation space, which is one of the most used space in the housing, that is interpreted differently, which otherwise are usually never designed or the experiential quality of the circulation space is never thought of. So just like these circulation spaces here, can we think of any other space that has the potential to become open space in the housing society? We'll now look at few more classical examples like the Kanchenjunga apartment in Mumbai built by Charles Correa. It is claimed that the private terrace gardens here are an interpretation of the traditional Indian housing. Here the key idea of multiple spaces opening up into the terraces and its scale and volume makes this terrace more than just a balcony space. But now if we compare this with Skydeck Select in Ahmedabad, how do you think it is different? More or less all the characteristics of Skydeck Select is similar, but here even though it has a double high terrace space, the very fact that it is connected only to the living room and not to any other parts of the house within, it makes it just a balcony space. If we compare Kanchenjunga with Walden 7, here in Walden 7, each unit has its own individual balcony spaces, which are essentially at the periphery of the unit, but because of the fact that they are all inward looking into the central courtyard, encourages social interaction across levels. We will look at two more examples. One, Aranya Township built by B.V. Doshi in 1961. Here the key design elements are the hierarchy and the interlinking of the open spaces, where 2 to 3 houses share a courtyard and 6 such clusters come together to form bigger courtyards, and all of the clusters put together come together to form the central community open space. If we compare this with Belapur housing built by Charles Correa, again it's all the similar typology of open spaces. But the main difference here is the level of privacy within the unit open space. In Aranya Township, though there is a private open space which is essentially the balcony space that is being provided, because of the fact that they open up into the main streets or into the cluster courtyard, it defeats the purpose of it being a private open space, whereas in Belapur housing, each unit has its own large private courtyard, and the very fact that the compound wall itself is high enough does not allow others to peep into the open space. Certain conclusions can be drawn from the above mentioned case studies if we largely put them across the timeline. The need for private open space has increased over time, which in turn has decreased the social interaction. This can be observed in today's housing as well. So now that we have looked at what has already been happening, it is important for us to address the question of what we should do now. Should we still make mass first, or should the mass and void go parallel in the design process? What is the real significance and the role of these open spaces in the future of urban Indian housing? Is it is it the social interaction or the privacy? What do you think is more critical for an Indian household? As architects, should we design apartments that is more socially interactive, or should we prioritize privacy? Let's debate.
So we take who is presenting next? You are. So this session is broadly centered upon open space or social space, right? Which is why we are asking questions of what is the, how do people, on one hand, how do people come together as a community, but on the other hand, what is the relevance of open space when it comes to a house as well? Is it part of the public domain or is it part of the private domain? Since I think the other presentations are also on the same line, maybe we take the presentations first and then go on questions.
Good afternoon to everyone present here. My seminar topic for the day is a very generic and seemingly naive question. What is a balcony? What activities are they used for, and thus how should they be designed? The dictionary definition of a balcony is a platform built on an upstairs outside wall of a building with a wall or a rail around it. And that is indeed how most of us see it. And thus that is how balconies are made and not designed in housing projects. Why am I asking this question though? Let's take a look at this plan, or more specifically, at the balcony areas. The blue here shows the living area which the entrance of the apartments open into, and the green is the bedroom which lies adjacent to the living area but is staggered. What happens to balconies is that they essentially become a form of filler space which completes the staggered part. As I explained before, you can see the same thing happening here, where the balconies fill the staggered area between living area and bedrooms, or bedrooms and toilets. The balconies thus become just an afterthought, a required amenity in a unit to aid the market value of the project. So, we know what are the functional requirements of bedrooms, of living areas, of toilets and kitchens, study rooms and dining areas. However, what are the functions of a balcony? Would knowing that help us to design them differently? Apartments in multi-story housing exhibit a horizontal translation of the vertical relations which exist in single or double-story housing. In that case, what is the balcony a derivative of? Let's look at this list of activities on the right, and then let's take a look at some pictures. A place to chat with neighbors, to have a cup of chai, to buy wares from vendors, to greet guests, to keep a watch on the child playing outside, to meet friends or to play with pets. How about we weave a narrative for this image? Leaving the household items at the front of the entrance, the mover joins the family for a break. The snacks are kept on the floor. The younger child had to be helped up. The platform was too high for her small body. The adults sit dangling their legs and have rice cakes, laughing at the antics of the children as they race up and down, tumbling over each other in the adjoining passage. Imagine a place where you stand with a cup of hot coffee in the morning, rest your palm against a cool support, and breathe in the smell of coffee beans. Or a place where you sit with your knee propped up, a murderous look in your eye, watching your guilty friend walk towards you very stiffly after revealing all your hidden mischief to your mother. A ceremonial walk, but not in a good way. Imagine reading a newspaper precariously balanced at the edge of a raised platform because the light there is just right. Friends poring over a mobile phone as they seat themselves comfortably in the front of the house. A cozy spot both for humans and stray dogs. Each image can give us a narrative of a certain activity. So how about we review the initial list again? If your program brief was not a space but this list of activities, what could the design be? To the left is my initial idea of what I had thought a balcony was. It's very stereotypical. To the right is a conceptual design of a balcony. The sketch is definitely very rough, but this is a result of me taking 5 minutes after reviewing the list of activities to come up with these initial conceptual ideas for a balcony. It is definitely not the best design possible, but has ideas which could be explored further in contrast to the balconies I had shown earlier. Let us look at a different list now. A place to wash utensils, to dry pickles, have private conversations, to celebrate events or festivals. I would have liked to walk here barefoot. If it was winter and blankets would have been laid out on charpai to air them out, it would be a lovely feeling to sink into warm blankets and look up at the sky. If you come back to this space after a very long day, would you take a seat on the otla or would you have a chai on the balcony? Would this be a place you would be comfortable hanging out your laundry, or would you have preferred more screening? Would you have liked to sit by, read a book, legs stretched out, and watch as the damp roads dry in the wind? Do you have memories of drying chilies or sorting saffron with your family? The saffron would be spread out on sheets of jute across the floor. Of course, you would need enough space for that. And then kneeling on the ground, crawling on hands and knees, everyone would work, and by the end, everyone's hands would be stained red. So if the program brief had been this list of activities, what would the design be? Maybe something bit more than what here is shown as a utility balcony. To the right is again a design of a balcony which, like last time, is a result of me taking 5 minutes to design after reviewing the list of activities. Knowing the activities I was designing for allowed me to at least explore different forms of ideas in relation to a balcony. A smaller list this time, a place of surveillance. The hidden viewer. Hidden as long as they want and when desired, making their presence known. With these activities, what could a possible design be? Maybe something more than this? Here it was working with the 60 centimeter free of FSI projection allowed in housing that I was trying to figure out different ways and degrees of play which could be allowed while designing a housing facade. Again, let's look at the list of activities here. It's Uttarayan. You step into a bright expanse of space, rooftops of the city with sky dotted with kites. You can hear people either encouraging or hurling curses at each other as they try to cut their opponent's kite. You look down and people's lives play out in their own small pockets of space. Be it children playing, people drying laundry, stashing away old furniture, people asking neighbors to lower the volume of their arguments, or the uncles of the house sleeping under the sky during days of a family wedding. Now, why am I constantly trying to make the narratives is because of this question that I had started the presentation with. What activities are balconies used for, and thus how should they be designed? Housing projects are homes for the families which reside there, and balconies can become a space for so many activities which can liven up the other spaces of the house. So if I ask the question again, how could one design a space for these activities, and would it change the way we would approach them? Here I tried to do it a bit differently. This time, where I was trying to attempt if I could still make a balcony interesting without redesigning the entire unit from scratch. I took one of the plans from the list of 6 that I had shown in the earlier slides. The red here demarcates a single unit in the block. This was traced, and keeping same floor plate, same service areas, I drew over the existing plan to make different possible designs of a balcony. I would love if anyone here could come up with narratives of activities which they imagine could play out in the balcony and the rooms of this apartment. I'll just tell what the rooms are. So you enter and so that's the living. Above that is the balcony. Right adjacent to that it's the kids' room, and behind that the parents. And down you have the kitchen and utility area. If anyone could just come up with maybe like just 2 narratives for the plans I show later. I just want to see if we can come up with sort of activities which can happen in these spaces.
I can imagine going from the living room to the sunken balcony and then personalize the corner with some potted plants probably, and have like a personal, very private entry to my bedroom. And it's also interesting that there's a a window which is seating, and it's not looking outside but it's looking into my own living room. space, and then it shows like this panoramic view of the closed living with the jula and the semi-open.
Anyone else? Just one more maybe for this plan.
Maybe I can imagine a kid in the kids' room sleeping, and maybe his mom shouting from the dining, waking him up. And then he just sneaks through the small opening into the balcony. And then his mom comes searching for him. And then him taking a stroll up, like running around and then entering and hiding somewhere near the kitchen or the utility. Which is happening essentially because of the multiple openings and options to run around in the house.
Let's take a look at the second one now. Here the spaces are the same. The balcony wraps around much more. You enter into the living. Up is the dining, the kids' bedroom, parents' bedroom, and additional bedroom towards the bottom right. And at the absolute bottom is the utility balcony. Could anyone come up with any narratives of balconies here? Kids, parents?
I'm imagining since that the second part of the balcony, which is smaller, is more private, the master bedroom would be that. And therefore the other is the kid bedroom. The kid has a lot of choice in terms of using their entire balcony space as their own personal playground. But at the same time, there's a constant surveillance if the parents want to look into the kids. Like from the balcony, they can look through the small opening towards the balcony, or when someone is in the kitchen and they're running around, someone has an eye on the kid. The kid has the freedom that they would expect while moving around in a house. It's not restrictive, but at the same time, their safety or the thing that the parents would want would be ensured in that space.
Right.
I think also the fact that you made one side like towards the left, the balcony width is much bigger towards the kitchen. So I think it was your intention to sort of use that space more like a spillover for the kitchen itself, like the drying of drying of spices, and which usually happens in an Indian household.
Yes. And then if we perhaps move to the okay, yeah, the third one is the functions remain same in terms of like I said, the location of the toilets, the bedrooms. This time you're opening into a more L-shaped living area, and the balconies like are scattered across. So could anyone come up with any narratives or activities for this?
I think if I'm a mom who's kind of trying out the clothes in the balcony, and I kind of want to keep a watch on my kids probably in the room adjacent to the balcony, but I want to keep it discreet. I don't want to make them feel as if they're being watched over, so I might just take a route away from the main entrance and just kind of peep into their room, make sure they're all good, and go back to work.
I also think there's a lot of loops that are forming here, and the way you place the balconies are like the shortcuts for these loops would be through these balconies. So in mass urban housing, how people feel very confined and in a closed off space, I can imagine that the kids won't be feeling that, because, or anyone for that matter won't be feeling that, because to take the shortcut for any from any room to any room, you'll have to go through an open space. And I think that's a very different feeling from what most apartments do.
So the reason I had been like asking if anyone could come up with these activities was, did listening to the stories or making the stories seem like a fun activity? To imagine how lives might play out in these spaces that we designed for users that we do not know. The intention of my presentation was mainly to ask why balconies are neglected in apartment housing projects. Because even a little bit of thought, and we can come up with stories which can play out in these areas to liven up the other areas of the houses. This, in comparison to the others, conceptual sketches, this was 10 minutes of tracing over a plan. But if those 10 minutes can make a difference, then maybe we can start reconfiguring different spaces of apartments in a different way. People often spend their entire lives in an apartment where the balcony is basically the place where they get their slice of the sky. So would creating these narratives of everyday activities help us see them differently? What would a balcony be for you when you approach designing a apartment complex after this? Thank you.
So it was interesting that in most of the plans that you made, you connected one balcony to multiple spaces. That to me seemed common across all your design of balconies. And if I go back to when you were talking of, when you were comparing Kanchenjunga with Skydeck Select, even though in Kanchenjunga also you cannot enter from all the 4 spaces, but there are those 4 spaces in the house which overlook the balcony. Whereas you're saying in Skydeck Select, it's just from the living room that you can access. So I see one thing common across all your iterations is that you're ensuring that the balcony is not a destination, that it does not have just one door opening into it, because of which in the narratives that people are giving, they are able to talk of how people go in and out of the balcony. You never go into the balcony and come back the same way that you went in, which I think is So I'm just wondering whether that was subconscious, that you're trying to ensure that it's not a destination, because even in the other cases where the utility was at the bottom right, you made a separate connection either from the dining room or whatever room was on the other side.
I mean, maybe, yeah, that could have been subconsciously, because essentially, like, so when I was talking about activities, so you imagine a person sitting here, then going somewhere else. So like these plans on the left, why I again made them clear was because it was not understood here, but I was constantly making these sort of like routes and possibilities which different activities would follow, and then like around the narrative, try and make walls or openings and design them accordingly. So that is essentially what it is.
So what would you say is, I mean, both the presentations, the common thing in both the presentations is about the idea of the open space in the house or attached to the house. So how do you look at the open space in the house? So after having done the studies that both of you have done, if you had complete freedom, if nothing else was a limitation, a developer, cost, this, that, what, in your mind, what would be the proportion of open space and enclosed space in a house? If it was possible to do whatever you want.
Either half and half or 3/5 and 2/5.
Either half and 3/5 is what? Enclosed. Open, you are saying. So you say 50 to 60% open space and
Like only the absolute activities which need privacy will enclose rest.
okay. But in your presentation you were pointing out to some that over a period of time or historically, do you think so? Would you say that historically that percentage is changing?
Yes, definitely it's changing in terms of like if you look at the current housing. But I feel like it's not just about the size or the proportion of it. It is also to do with like if I tie back to it, is the kind of activity that we are also imagining in those spaces. Because if I compare it with my own presentation, there are still large volumes of open spaces. Even as per GDCR rules, we are supposed to be providing it, which is fine. But to what extent are these connected to the activities that we do? Is it, I feel like it is more of a tie of the activities that is associated with these open spaces, not just providing like a large sort of, that way if I look, even Skydeck Select has a much larger open space,
Yes.
much larger balcony, but is it really serving the purpose of a balcony, or, I mean, that is a...
I think that's a fair point. You are saying that just the percentage itself doesn't matter, it's about how the percentage is actually designed. But again, if I take that to this case, it does seem that in all your iterations, you have increased the area of the balcony. Or if I ask you the question, so completely agreed that Skydeck Select you are giving us a good example. It's a large balcony, but maybe not as connected to the house or not as integral as a part of the house as the Kanchenjunga balcony, because 4 rooms are overlooking that same space, so it's like the social space of the house. But in both cases, Kanchenjunga and Skydeck Select, the absolute size of the balcony is definitely more than the initial balcony size here. The initial balcony is, I think, 1.2 meters by something, or 90 centimeters by 3 meters. Those are the balconies, which does not allow us to do multiple activities because the depth is very less. But that also brings the question of, I mean, what all do we do in those open spaces of the house? If both of you are saying that it's the activity that matters more, and that a house consists of lot of activities which are done in open spaces, and also a lot of activities, or if you're saying lesser activities which are done in enclosed spaces, then it does beg the question, what is the proportion? Like interestingly, I mean, the moment you have a balcony, a bungalow type, of course because of the margin regulations, in a bungalow type it's almost 50-50, even though the proportion of that open space is weird, it's 1.5, 1.53 and 1.5. But if I look at it in terms of absolute percentages, it's fairly high. Which allows you to use the backyard in a different way, the front yard in a different way.
If you connect this to the conversation of flexibility which was happening, these are the spaces which allowed the previous, when you started showing the old city patterns, how they were using the open spaces, there was a flexibility in terms of making a choice that I could perform this activity in the interiors of the space or the exteriors of the space. But while in this balcony, though we could actually maintain the proportion of this balcony and just change the dimensions of it. So instead of 0.9, if that dimension is stretched to say 1.5, and then it is reduced and inserted between 2 bedrooms, then still it becomes a usable space. Also, like if a bedroom totally opens up into an open space, and that open space and the bedroom becomes one open space at a point and then closes off when it is required, then that flexibility is actually which is working. So that is something which we observed in previous things that you were showing, but that is something which we are not trying to do because of maybe, I don't know, the material restrictions or stacking up of the blocks and not making the walls flexible enough to perform different activities.
So a lot of these activities that both of you are alluding to that happens in the open space, are you saying that these are things that could happen or should happen or are happening, or people want to do it but they are unable to do it because they don't have it?
I think it is happening. Even like for example, there are like this drying of spices and everything. It does happen in my house, but then it is at a much. So once that is put, then it takes at least 4 or 5 days, let's say, to dry. Then you don't have space to walk around in the balcony. There's that sort of limitation to it. But yeah, it is. I don't think it will stop. Or I think those activities might still continue. But it's just then people are sort of either sacrificing or compromising because of the limitation that the current housing is offering.
Since you're working on modifying
the existing balconies into much usable space. If you have observed in the skyline of Ahmedabad, there are many people who are extending their living areas and having these profiles built around and using it as an extension of living area. So, and it's very prominent. In an apartment block, if you take in a floor, at least one person would have done that. So do you think that open space is not required for them, or what is the urge for them to make that balcony also an extension of their living area? What is making them do that? Having to, since you're focusing on voids and open space.
I also pointed this out in my presentation that most there are a lot of balconies that is being blocked and converted into study area or some sort of I don't know, storage. I've seen images where in my own friends' house there it becomes like a storage sort of thing.
So as a designer, could we make balconies in such a way that people cannot enclose it? Like it's a compulsion, like bathroom jaise banate you cannot convert it to anything. So same way can we make balconies in such a way that people cannot make it as an extension of the room? As a designer, maybe we could think of that. Cause of this stacking, they already have that slab over, so they just have to build partition around it to make it an extension of the room. So since you are working on layers of modification, so I think that also could be one lens that you could look at.
But flexibility, people will argue against it. People want to close the balcony, then who are you to insist that balcony?
That was also an idea I had been looking at in an earlier draft of the presentation where we enclosed the space, but the reason why here I started focusing more on the open thing was mainly because of the fact that I felt like balconies were being underutilized according to whatever people also I had talked to, was because they didn't have the space. Open spaces can actually be used in your lower one single or double story housing, and if the balconies are designed and given enough space in that way, people might actually have a tendency that they might actually prefer using the space as it is. But again, if ever a need does acquire for a family, why not give them freedom to close it if they want to?
I also think in a context like Ahmedabad, it is also sort of difficult to maintain a balcony. It either gets really dusty, or the monkeys poop in it, or there's a pigeon's nest. So also the orientation of balcony, if it's I think on the southern side, pigeons come more on southern facing balconies. So I think if I don't go home for like 2 nights, I do a night out and there's a pigeon's nest in my balcony. So I also think that sometimes it's also about the maintenance and who was using the balcony, the what activity it is being used.
That just comes to an argument there whether you really need an open space or not. do you just shut yourself across, or then there's nothing, there's zero maintenance?
If you don't have a balcony, you don't shut yourself. There are windows.
No, but I think what you're trying to say is that, so, and this is a point that a lot of homeowners also raise, that the balcony gets dusty, dirty, especially in Ahmedabad, pigeons, monkeys and all that. What is very fascinating is that if the same people are living in a bungalow, they don't say that the pigeons are coming in the front lawn or the backyard, or that monkeys are coming there, because actually, if you go to the meaning of the open space, I think the meaning of the open space is that it's a dirty space, or it's the same as any outdoor space. To me, I get a sense of whether people are treating the balcony as an open space or not based on what kind of broom they use to sweep the balcony. Because if you look in a bungalow, for example, I don't do jhadu pocha on the front margin of the bungalow every day. Or even if I do, so I don't use a savarni, I use a savarno, the thick bristles jhadu, right? Because the image is different. So people living in apartments are unable to create that conceptual divide, that there is a part of my house which is dirty. And I'm okay with it. If there's a pigeon poop, I'll clean it maybe after 2 days. But I see that that is also the difference between a lot of people try to make corridors as upper level streets in housing. But because of the finishes, because of people's imagination, they are not able to accept dirt in that corridor. The way they would accept dirt in the common grounds of their project. The moment you can't accept dirt means that for you that space is no longer open space in your mind. It is an enclosed space with a large window. So that desire for keeping it clean is as much as inside your house. Sometimes even the circulation makes that problematic in the sense that, so again I live in an apartment where from the bedroom I can go out into a back terrace or a back balcony, and from the kitchen utility balcony also I can go out. But what happens, unlike a bungalow, is that where you just have the front door or the back door. Now because I am going out from the bedroom and the kitchen, a lot of times I forget to wipe my feet when I come back. That terrace is dirty, we keep it as dirty as a front garden because pigeons come and monkeys come, you can't stop it. But that means every time I step into my bedroom or step into my kitchen from that terrace, in my mind I should be coming from outside my home to inside my home, and I should do the same activity that I do if I go from set to home. I don't do that. So that's where the challenge happens, right? That ideally maybe I should keep a set of slippers there, that I'm going outside my house and I wear slippers to take care of dirt. I don't do that. So there is this tension of whether that balcony is part of my house or outside my house. And that's why a lot of balconies, like people are saying, actually in Ahmedabad it's before 2000 the bylaws, the regulations were that a 4-foot balcony was free of FSI. So all projects in Ahmedabad before 2000 have a 4-foot balcony. And more than 50% of the apartment people, they have covered it to convert it into a store or some sort of a small space. But if you're interested, it's worth studying whether those conversions are more in 1 BHK, 2 BHK or 3 BHK. The conversions are the most in 1 BHK. So that tells us probably that people are not enclosing it because they don't find value in it. People are enclosing it because their need for storage space or a study area for the kids is much more than the need for open space. So they are taking a call as to which is needed. So the bigger the apartment, so ideally one would do a correlation between number of people in the house and size of the house and whether the balcony is being enclosed. If you find that they get enclosed only in high density houses, then we can probably say that they value it but not enough.
So here we are talking about balconies in terms of a single unit and also that only for middle class or maybe above that. If we start to put this into a context of SRA housing or any kind of below LIG or EWS housing, those are the spaces which are to be shared by a lot of units. And then again the trouble of who is going to maintain it, who is going to keep track of it. But then that is the basic necessity for them to live, because that is where all kind of activities they were working with, or they were making their life alongside those spaces. But those are very systematically removed when they are developing the newer kind of housing which government is providing them. And then they are giving them this pathetic
small
0.9, 0.8 kind of
spaces where they could, and then that is too not attached to any of the room, mostly somewhere in between kitchen or somewhere backside of toilet, just for the sake of it.
Yeah. So I think it's.
I think that might be also because in case of EWS or whatever, in that case, I think rather than balconies, I think the proportion is between walls and openings, where people also need walls for storage, walls for storing their items, rather than giving a balcony. Even in this case, what if we don't have a balcony and that space comes inside the living space, where when we take the massing in place in G plus 14 or in 14th or 13th floor, where even if the entire space goes into living space, if we have the entire space as openings, that also opens up into the outside surface, and also from the interior we use that as a usable space rather than a door or enclosure coming in between living and balcony. I feel that acts as more usable space, but in case of EWS or LIG, I feel balconies or walls has a different play there, because people need space for walls also. If we keep entire openings, if we keep bedroom open to outside, we don't have place to dry your clothes, or all those things also changes. I think that is where the play actually changes between houses. In case of HIG, we don't have that constraint, the space constraint or those things. I think there is also
it is a question of publicness, like balconies as a niche between the public and the private, and that is where all kind of informal activities are happening, or informalness is there in those activities, and people are ready to participate in it. But now very nicely it has been removed from the buffer between the public and private and put attached with the private separately, where it is becoming a hindrance also in most of the times. Like over here also, it's a place between living and the outside. So most of the time it becomes just an extension to the living, and I never feel that I'm outside actually, because most of, at least here I'm getting that L corner. Most of the time we don't even get that. It's just a straight, and it becomes a puncture too.
I think that was the thing that I was raising also in my timeline. Like, if you look at the timeline, I don't know if people are aspiring for more of a private open space, or do we look at social interaction as a key element in Indian housing? Because if I look at all the examples that I had picked up in the timeline, if I had put the social interaction is just reducing over time because of the way. Is it because of the way we are designing, or is it because there is actually no need for a social interaction? Is something that was raised when I was also doing that time.
So just to quickly touch upon the couple of points raised here. So when we talk of low income or SRA kind of housing, we need to keep in mind that in a slum kind of environment, before they move into redevelopment, the open spaces are very heavily used. That is because the cost of making an open space is substantially lower than the cost of making an enclosed space, and you can share open spaces in a way that it's difficult to share enclosed spaces the way you can share open spaces. The moment you transpose that in a formal housing environment, which is your slum rehabilitation schemes or something like that, I think a lot depends on whether, irrespective of whether it's a corridor or a lift lobby or a personal balcony, a lot depends on whether it's free of FSI or counted in FSI. Because the FSI cost of space is much more than the construction cost of the space. I mean, that's the only reason before 2000, all all housing in Ahmedabad had 4-foot balconies. It was, you are getting it only at construction cost, and you are selling it at full cost. Right? So it is a, why would I not give a balcony? And the moment you say that balconies also will be counted as part of FSI, suddenly you start looking at balcony from a very different perspective. Which is why, it's interesting, you look at Pune for example, where double height balconies are free of FSI. and single height is not free of FSI, then you see all apartments have double height balconies. So they will stagger the balconies to make it free of FSI, and balconies are large because even for the developer you are selling it like a nice beautiful room and it is free of FSI. So I think two things determine a lot, especially when it comes to balcony as open space. Is it free of FSI? And the second question is it counted in margins? Can I build it in margins or not? Because that was the other, when the 4-foot balcony was free of FSI in Ahmedabad, that 4-foot was allowed in the margin space. Because the moment I say it's free of FSI but I will not allow it in margin space, then you will do it only if your FSI is low and height limitation is unlimited. Then you can afford to waste margin space, right? So it's a curious sort of play between how regulations look at balconies and therefore the cost of providing any space in housing. And so even when they try to make corridor like if you look at Lakudi Talab housing, which is a redevelopment scheme in Ahmedabad, the corridor like space is very tight because they don't want to waste any more FSI. Because then the argument made is you either have an option of giving it as a corridor for all, or you can put it in the house of the person. Anyways, if I am having a small house, actually people would prefer to have a larger room than have a common corridor. So it becomes very difficult if that corridor or that balcony or open space has to compete against FSI space. So I think that at least in the case of Ahmedabad 2000, the building bylaw change in 2000 marked the death of the balcony in apartments. So you see all your pre-2000 projects, even low income, middle income, 1 BHKs, they all have 4-foot. Which again becomes fascinating that the balcony bylaw had nothing to do with the size of the house. So even for a 4 BHK you get a 1.2 meter balcony free of FSI, and even for a 1 RK you get 1.2 meter balcony free of FSI. But for a 1 RK, that 1.2 free of FSI balcony might be 30% of their carpet area. So it is, in a way it is great that they are also getting the same benefit. So I could, all it takes is one regulation change. I could say that for all houses with carpet area less than 40 square meters, balcony is free of FSI. If it is more than 40 square meters, it is counted. And suddenly you will see that everything changes because people will respond to that.
Why do you think this 1.2 rule fall off from the research?
Okay, so if there was a reason for it, so if you look at all pre-2000 housing projects in Ahmedabad and you look at their passing plans, there were 4-foot balconies all around. So on paper, you see that 3x3 or maybe 3x4 bedroom, it will be shown as a 2 meter by 3 meter bedroom and a 4-foot balcony. So you look at all passing plans, all bedrooms in Ahmedabad on paper are 2.1 meter by 3 meter in the passing plan. And once the passing is done, they would take the balcony inside.
Make them bedroom bigger.
Make them the bedroom. So it was being misused a lot. But that I think that has largely been the tragedy in India, that we make well-meaning policies, they get misused, and then instead of trying to enforce that policy well, we change the policy. The rule ही नहीं रखते. So constantly the rules are being modified to ensure that people don't game the rules. It's an unfortunate sort of direction to go to. Rather, what we should be doing is that whoever encloses that 4-foot balcony should be counted in FSI. But we need people who will go and inspect that. And the economics of it is so lopsided. The person who is typically in the working in the municipal corporation whose job it is to go on site and give the occupancy certificate must be earning 20,000 a month salary. A builder will give 2 lakh rupees. एक पूरे project में सारे balcony turn करवाने के लिए 2 lakh is nothing. So if I'm on a 20,000 salary and I get 2 lakh per sign, why would I not? It takes a lot of uprightness to say no to that. Which is why you will notice that in many countries abroad, they say that they ensure that whoever is policing, not only police but these kind of rule enforcers and teachers, they get paid the most. Because they say that one is increasing the quality of society and the other is policing it to ensure that that quality remains. If you look at Indian society, I'm not talking of universities or colleges, but school teachers and policemen, they are paid the least. So obviously they find alternative sources of income. I take tuition or I do all of this. It's no way. But since, I guess since we are talking of the space just outside the house, you are presenting this. Okay.
Good afternoon everyone. I'm Simran, and before I let you on to what my seminar is about, I'd like to tell you an eventful day, take you through the journey of an eventful day of a little boy, and I'd also like you to sketch your imaginations, so during or after. Okay. So Kazu, a mere 7-year-old, resides in the enigmatic city of Basel with his mother Prima. What sets Kazu's life apart is the peculiar geographical location of Basel. Basel and Alcoma share the same latitude-longitude on the map at the same time. But you must not confuse them as the same place. They're two separate entities with governments, languages, and even cultures of their own. Prima has taught Kazu the intricate art of unseeing and unhearing, both people and objects from Alcoma since before he can recollect. Most times it's pretty easy to distinguish between what you ought to see and what you don't. Alcomans, with their different skin color, embrace their vibrant culture with a riot of colors and chaos. When you see it from a distance, you observe 100 golden spheres, each symbolizing a different religion. While in Basel, it's difficult to distinguish between people and the architecture, with herds of women clad with closets religiously in dark grey. Kazu's friends in Basel maintain an air of hushed politeness and disciplined restraint. They queue up for everything and hesitate to vocalize even the slightest disagreement. Yet on occasion, Kazu's path crosses with a distinctly green Alcoman school bus, which is adorned with tassels on the windshield and a play area on its lower deck. Curiosity tugs at his heart, but resistance gets the better of him. Today, however, was no ordinary day. As Prima escorts Kazu to school, the vivid green bus emerges yet again. In a moment of unbridled excitement, Kazu leaps to establish eye contact with an Alcoman boy who peers out of the window in his direction. Prima acts swiftly, pulling him away, her reprimand sternly delivered. "Why can't I see it, mother?" a disheartened Kazu inquires. "Because the breach would come in exact punishment." "Do you mean the police?" "The breach surpasses the police and the government, Kazu. They will vigilantly oversee us to ensure that we do not engage with the Alcomans and otherwise." "But why can't we talk to the Alcomans?" Kazu persists. Later that day, Prima contemplates what might have happened if she hadn't intervened, well aware of the breach's limits. If she or one of her friends were to have a moment's failure, they silently enjoy the skyline of the two cities together, be irritated by the clamour of an Alcoman train. So long as it was not to be indulged in, she should be in no danger. But anything beyond that is a problem. But mistake me not, for it's not the breach keeping them apart. It's everyone in Basel and everyone in Alcova. Every minute, every day. But little does Prima know that every night this strange chasm contains a third city, unaware of its existence, a secret colony concealed from the sun's watchful gaze, a city between the cities living in plain sight, beyond the bridge. Floating paper lanterns guide Kazu through a labyrinth of clouds. He stumbles at first, but it's pretty easy to catch up on. Gasps of wonder at impossible feats and astounding sights surround him. In this magical city, you can communicate through telepathy. No barriers of language whatsoever. The walls of the city are made of ice that never melts, and when the first rays of dawn tickle them, they vanish into thin air, like whispers in the wind. He stumbles into a cloud and into what he thinks death must feel like, but he lands onto the lap of an alcove. Welcome to Eusapia, my child, he continues. The city is the product of an age-old battle between the two greatest illusionists from Basel and Alcoma, to turn the two cities into one. It appears without warning, seemingly at random locations, fleeting as moments of happiness go. It's anywhere and everywhere. It knows no bias to caste, creed, class or color of any sort. As long as you're Bez or Alcoman, you're welcomed inside with open arms. No trespassers. Unseen, like Alcomans to the Bez and vice versa. But there's one rule you must abide by. As dawn breaks, you go back to your day lives, pretending Eusapia doesn't exist. It's a truly magical place, but it isn't the spells that contribute to the magic of the city. It lies in the sheer excitement of what might even qualify as traveling through a foreign culture you spent years only imagining. And all of this while being in the city you reside in. No barriers of language. Exchange of information that you felt so close to yet so distant. Zero judgment. And voila. After all, magic can be of many kinds. And poof. As Kazu walks away from Eusapia and into the creeping dawn, he thinks that he felt more awake within the confines of what must be a dream. The morning alarm jolts him back into the realm of Basel and Alcoma. His journey through the mysterious city is a dream he'll cherish forever. But every night after, Kazu goes in search of Eusapia every time, persistently, stumbling upon different places, interesting in their own right, but nowhere as enchanting as Eusapia. So I'd like everyone to sketch what they're imagining Eusapia must be like.
It's like you're taking a class. Sketching class. There are crayons here.
You got 3 to 4 minutes to sketch. Just be quick. now that we've spent some time imagining what Eusapia must be like, let's talk about the magic of Eusapia. Why do you think Eusapia was as magical a place? What about Eusapia do you think made the best enthusiastic about talking to someone they spent years unseeing and unhearing? Now, as architects, we naturally tend to think that some places are truly more magical than others because of several reasons. But if the imaginations that we just did are any proof, there can be several different imaginations of Eusapia with no specific characteristic that are written in stone. And if it's a place that would appear and disappear at random locations, then would it be safe to say that the embodiment of it was definitely not the reason? But then what was it? Do you think language was the only barrier? To me, I think what truly made Eusapia a magical space is because it introduced the citizens and the residents to this term that was called interstitiality. Now the textbook definition of interstitiality is something that is occurring in or between an interval or intervening space or segment. Now, this was the faculty of Eusapia. It would give Kazu a place to talk to the Alcomans, which wasn't as daunting and foreign as Alcoma to the best, and vice versa, as Basel to the Alcomans. In other words, Eusapia was this interstitial space that gave both the cities and its residents a place that was neither their home, but nor not their home, and somehow both of them all at once. Hence, both the cities could communicate in a place that was not as comfortable as home, but comfortable enough to be able to gain the merits of knowledge, which would lead to self-development and growth. But in order to really understand why we readily forego the comfort of being in our own home for a state which is only providing a percentage of comfort to us, let's talk about what we mean by home first. Now, the most common definition of home is whenever something provides you comfort, safety, and perhaps maybe some sense of ownership. That place becomes your home. What's not home there? Somewhere not home would be somewhere which provides you uncertainty. Here things excite you, bring about a thrill, because the result of it is uncertain and the possibility of working out, of all of it working out in your favor is where the thrill stems from. Naturally, this cannot happen when you're home, surrounded by safety and comfort and some degree of assurance or certainty. You must have heard of people saying they move from a city, change jobs, start taking on more challenges because it got too comfortable. But if comfort is such a positive feeling, then why do we not want to have it all the time? Because when we learn that something is too comfortable, then there is no goal in my mind, and hence no accomplishment. And hence you're not moving forward, just remaining stagnant. This is why we want this striking balance between home and not home. The best of both worlds. Something that would serve our self-growth and development, and to each their own. Now that we've talked about this striking balance so much, which lies somewhere in this interstitiality, there are also varying degrees of home and not home at each place and each time. Can one of you think of an example for this interstitial space? Yeah. There are certain designated spaces, interstitial spaces, such as Otla or Varanda in that sense, or a balcony from a colony, things like that. But I'd actually like all of you to think about it once again. Does your Otla always remain an interstitial space? Is it always this space between home and not home? Or is it sometimes also your home? And is it sometimes also not your home? So, what about when you're having a huge party going on inside your house and you step outside in the veranda at the night to gather a moment of peace? is the veranda still between home and not home, or is it not your home at that point? So sometimes, like I mentioned before, or when you're talking to a certain friend and want to have a private conversation, so you step outside into your balcony or your utla where your family members can't hear you, that interstitial space becomes your home. When monkeys, like we talked about in the last discussion, take over your interstitial space, say in the balcony or veranda, it practically becomes impossible to come out of it. And hence, at that point in time, the veranda is not your home. Sometimes I think places can also be home and not home at the same time, and they do not need to be these designated interstitial spaces or any interstitial space for that matter, or any space for that matter. So when you're going out for a drive with your parents for coffee, I think that space becomes both your home and not your home at the same time. For people with domestically abusive marriages, going to their designated home somehow becomes neither home and nor not home. For people living in, say, 3 different cities and having 3 different houses in 3 different cities at the same time, sometimes the home can also not be your home. So homeless people outside the temple complexes or on the street, or like here on the ghats of Varanasi, because of the community, sense of community that happens with the other fellow people who also sit there to have their meals, something that is not your home or something that you do not own also becomes a home. So in fact, I think what all of this is trying to tell us is that a singular place cannot be interstitial throughout. Then then I think it would be safe to say that it's the character or the intangible quality of interstitiality that we should really extract while observing and try to bring out while designing. We all have fondness towards vernacular housing, like we just talked about in the morning, and everything that comes with it. Say verandas, courtyards, shops, all of these spaces are designated interstitial spaces. But in order to retain that in urban mass housing, we tend to emulate the characteristics, say like the ratio of length to breadth, the plinth height, the ornamentation, the motif, things like that, the tangible aspects of it. While it is the character that we really need to think about. Just like you say, Priya, we don't know, we've been searching for it our whole life. And once we get the taste of it, we end up craving it for life. Just like people who live in pole houses their whole lives and shift to the city for the sake of convenience. So basically, interstitial spaces occur at different space-time intersections and lie somewhere in between this home and not home. Then do interstitial spaces only need a physical manifestation? Is it then a space or a mental construct? And to extend it, since we're a group of architects and designers gathered here, I'd also like to trigger a debate saying, if other non-physical manifestations of an interstitial space exist and are doing what it intends to, how comfortable are we as architects with that? And how relevant is our agency then? Will other people be able to design interstitial spaces as ideas, or does our agency transcend physical limitations? Thank you.
You're like asking existential questions at 3 in the afternoon. But I think what you're asking at the end about whether it is a physical or mental construct is also fascinating, although it's taking us in a different direction to the bulk of what you're saying. But I do think that especially with the internet and the network society, space-time relations have fundamentally changed. And like we were discussing when we were talking of is Instagram the Otla? Is Instagram the contemporary Otla? And if that is now the Otla, then you don't need a physical Otla. So maybe to me the larger question that this is asking is that is earlier the meaning of architecture existed because there was a limitation to space-time relations, in the sense that in a very pragmatic way I would say I could not FaceTime someone in the US, for example, or I could not talk to someone who is not physically present next to me. And first the landline, but then I think mainly internet changed all that. And so is the agency of the architect or the agency of architecture itself diminished in this sort of new space-time configuration, and that a lot of our understanding and critique of architecture, of say historical vernacular architecture, critique both in positive and negative sense, is of an era which is pre-space-time intermingled era. And now are we still sort of desirous of that? I personally feel that WhatsApp and Instagram are the balconies and Otlas where, or Charokas where I put up a story, I am deciding to stand in the Otla. Or I comment on a story and that is where someone is responding to me at the Otla. That physical balconies or that in-between space that you are talking about. Which I think is what, when you are asking the question home or not home, is tied to that from the lens of, I think I still feel that even when you are asking the question, a lot of us are confusing it with house and not house, which is not the same. I would say, for example, for most of you, CEPT is also home and your home is also home, in the sense that it's a predictable, safe space. So if you are defining home as predictable, safe, nurturing space, and the not home as unpredictable or unsafe or a thrilling space, then we should not overlay with the idea of the Otla or the balcony, which is like to me an interstitial between house and not house, and not an interstitial between home and not. But sometimes I also feel, I mean, when you are, whenever you have narrated the narrative, and because you are using these words to the alcoma or the bezel, it reminds me of a few years back someone in a similar studio was using language to talk of concepts. So her concept was boketo. Boketo is a Japanese word. The meaning of the word is staring into the distance without thinking anything particular. A lot of times, a lot of us are doing that. No? Staring into the, look at the specificity of the definition. Staring into the distance without thinking anything in particular. What was fascinating is that because the language, Japanese has a word for it, people recognize that existence or recognize that situation, and it's encapsulated in one word. A lot of times it happens that you are sitting and staring into the distance thinking of nothing, and suddenly your mom asks, what are you doing? And then you are saying nothing. And then I realize I do it to my kids also. And then I am asking them, how can you be thinking of nothing? You must be thinking of something. But actually you are thinking nothing in particular. That's why you end up saying nothing, because if someone asks what are you thinking, you have nothing to respond to. Now it's a very fascinating human condition. But if a language does not have a word for it, we don't recognize that condition. And so when you tell that story of Alcoma and Bezel and then you introduce Eusebia, I am wondering whether we don't have a word for that condition when it comes to home or not home. That what is this interstitial space? Because we have BHK as a condition, bedroom, hall, kitchen, we recognize that as conditions. And if I don't recognize something else as a condition, if I don't have a word for it, I think we don't recognize it as a condition. And so I am wondering whether language could also be a mechanism to, if from tomorrow in studio we start using a different set of terms for all the spaces that we are designing, instead of saying bedroom, hall, kitchen, we start saying Alcoma or Bezel or something. Kazoo. What is this? This is Kazoo. Now, just imagine how it completely changes our way of thinking. So I sometimes wonder whether we are trapped in BHK, not so much because if you look at it in India, not everyone is using a bedroom like bedroom or a hall like a hall. We are eating in the hall, we are eating in the bedroom. But because that word exists like that, we are trapped in that word play. So that first narrative part is like one can take it in that direction also. I think the other thing the narrative did was, because there was a polarization between Bezel and Alcoma, I think that's why Eusebia could exist. It existed only because of the polarization. What is your opinion about how polarized was inside the home and outside the home, say 13th century, versus how polarized home and not home is today?
I think, yeah, like we discussed earlier today, the gap was much smaller in the 13th century.
Gap between?
Gap between home and not home.
Okay.
And
why do you say that? I'm just asking.
yeah. Because I think now that we see there's so much theory of privacy and wanting to be inside your home and not knowing your own neighbor. And also a part of it comes from the fact that we're going outside to work like we talked about earlier, and I am getting my fair share of not home for the day while I'm not in that interstitial space. So when I sort of get back home, given that I have 3 hours to be home, I'll just sort of try to prefer being inside my home rather than going outside to talk to someone. Something like that.
If we talk about, like you were talking that Instagram is Utla now. When I go to home, I do see Instagram or WhatsApp then.
Yeah.
Ain't I technically outside?
Yeah. You're in that.
Not physically, but I am outside.
Correct. So that's what.
Same like in 13th century, you told I went outside to talk to neighbors. Here also I'm going outside. Not maybe neighbors, but
Maybe neighbors itself.
maybe neighbors, yeah.
We are still talking about interstitial spaces because that is not an outlaw, because everyone is putting a curated content over there, and I'm looking at that content with those filters that they are putting. And when I'm sitting on a outlaw, I'm looking at people as they are or as the life is happening. So there is.
But then won't people be putting up a pretense when they're in that outlaw, just for the fact that they know everyone can see me,
So they will be
and
like
I'll just
hiding what is actually inside there.
There are like perceptions created because of going to a physical space,
If you can be louder, we can't hear.
I mean that because if an outlaw exists physically, I think then when one crosses that threshold to be there, the setup that pretends only define certain characters that we would have to adhere to when we go there. And therefore in that case it's still a facade that you're creating, and therefore that you are creating an illusion. If it's
differently felt in a virtual reality, but otherwise it is still existing.
But just to get back to the 13th century, when I was asking, I think that not home was, or the difference was more stark. Why 13th century? For example, when I went on exchange, okay, there was no email. I didn't have a landline. So imagine I left Ahmedabad. After 6 months, I came back to Ahmedabad. My parents, I was writing letters, but that would take, I was not using speed post because it was super expensive in Zurich. So landline post, which was those letters were taking 2 months to reach. So imagine I leave home. I can't say whether the plane was on time. I don't know where they landed. When I went, I don't know how I will go from the airport to, I had a postal address of where I was going to stay. Now, can you imagine what the mental state is both for me and for my parents when I go outside home? In 13th century, if you went outside home, people were not sure whether you will come back. You could be robbed or waylaid on the way and you're done, right? So the moment you step out of your, so in your definition, I would say that the home was the house and outside the house was not home. That distinction was very clear. The moment I step out of the home, it's not that it's dangerous, it's unknown. It's an unknown situation I am in. So imagine traveling somewhere today. If I, even me, although I am used to that kind of traveling, today if I have to travel to a new city and you don't allow me to take my phone, I feel severely handicapped. I don't have maps, I don't have Uber, I can't imagine going, right? Which means that the not home or the outside the house space also has become so predictable. There is so much assurance today. I'm sure people going out on exchange, you go to a new country for the first time, you're not bothered. Imagine you didn't have a phone and you're going. It's a different thing altogether. So I feel that maybe we are increasingly moving towards a society where we want everything to be bezel. No? We don't want that alcoma to exist, which is that riot of colors and anything is happening. Bezel is all like planned, grey and everything, everyone marching in a line. We desire that predictability. So I'm wondering whether people don't want that not home at all. And so we are trying to convert everything into a home. But strangely enough, if alcoma disappears and also becomes bezel, then there is nothing left. There is no magic. Eusebia cannot exist, right? There will be no magic in life. So for your narrative is saying that for magic in life to happen, that other is necessary.
I also think that the interstitial spaces, like we discussed, they have a varying degrees of home between home to not home. And I think, like you said, they're trying to shift it more and more towards home, as opposed to how some spaces are to exist more towards not home, nearer to not home for that matter.
Yeah, we should just do an experiment. One day we all don't carry our mobile phones. One whole day. We hope without our mobile phone come to set and go back. I'm sure it will have some level of discomfort. But it will also have some level of excitement. Of that, or some thrill. Which you might remember for a long time. That's why that Eusebia disappears, but you long for that Eusebia. Somewhere we long for that thrill, but you are saying that maybe we want that thrill also in a safe environment, but that is like oxymoron. Yeah, it's strange. If you want thrill, then it has to come with some danger. Like even I mean, I will feel very uncomfortable if I leave my phone at home one day. You feel sort of, even though nothing will happen, nothing will happen. Now imagine you have to travel to another city and you leave your phone. That will be even more thrilling. It's like an adventure. So I could also argue that in society today everything is home. If I look, we want everything to be predictable and more.
But then I would say that like we still want, like you said, a certain in-betweenness, but it's moving closer to home. In the sense that if I'm on Instagram and it is giving me an in-between space, but it's some people could say it's home also in a sense, because it's giving me all the textbook reasons of home, like but then I'm also constantly exposed to my account being hacked, or in that sense I think in that metaphysical realm that would be sort of the uncertainty.
No, I think there's a much easier, if you want to give that, I think what Instagram should do is at random time it should take a picture and upload it itself. It could be any time of the day or night, your phone will take a picture and upload it. Now that is what you mean, right?
Yeah.
That I don't have full control over when I upload a story or a reel. It can do it anytime. You can also do it, but once a day, it will do it on its own.
With that, then it would be so much not home.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't even be interstitial for that matter. Like
it will be like that will be the thrill or the worry of that. When is it going to take a picture? But so then the question is that as a society, are we saying we don't want that? We are a society where we don't want that thrill. Where we are saying that no, let it be predictable. That even if we seek thrill, like we go to a Ferris wheel or something, there is a predictability to that.
Or at least you're prepared, I think.
Exactly. You decide that I will go to the Ferris wheel but not to this roller coaster because it's too much for me. So even that thrill you are sort of gauging. So it's a planned, predictable thrill. True thrill is when it is unpredictable. But yet not unsafe. Like what's unsafe about your phone taking a picture when you don't know?
The studio has the potential of becoming an exhibition center because there are so many ideas which could be converted into an art.
Yes, true. But that's what studios should be. They should be a hotbed of ideas. While we keep dealing with the profitability and the bylaws. But that should not preclude us from doing this. Okay, I think we should.
designed to meet your superior standards. Be spoiled for choice with a large selection of luxury amenities, as well as ready-to-use fitness centers.
With the permission of the chairman, Shri Gajaranji Sappal, can we proceed for the meeting? अपने जितने भी हमारे यहाँ पे members हैं, 90 members.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Yelega and my seminar focuses on highlighting the difference in the expectations to reality in the use of amenities in housing and to generate a discussion on the possible ways to cater to the reality. If that previous video has not been enough to see that difference, let's review these footages again. Now, going further, let us start by defining the basic quality of what is expected as an amenity. Merriam-Webster defines it as something that helps to provide comfort, convenience or enjoyment. It is something that promotes the smoothness or pleasantness in social relationships. Therefore, it should be something that people will use in reality, right?
Yes, of course, but...
Now, let's start by reconsidering the amenities. So, if the present amenities are not being successful in this aspect, how do we go about designing it? Now, largely the advertisements that are provided provide an image of a lifestyle that is not completely utopian, but it largely seems to coincide with the lifestyle from the West. These are images that are seen by us in advertisements that are completely not utopian, but just seem out of place for us. But in the Indian context, this is the plight that happens when the designed amenities are replicated as such in a context that is being introduced here. However, if the nature of the activities in such places are completely different, R&D solutions also require differently. Now, if you look in India, such are the nature of the activities that seem to involve and inculcate a lively interactions among communities. The streets of chawls, the terraces in these chawls, a place in a housing complex where people interact among each other while buying from vegetable vendors. Or even sometimes in places there are large open grounds that are completely not designed and are left as an empty plot. Like we see in the Kumbh Mela, there are just electric lines that are provided on these sand grounds over which people start organizing their tents, and there's a large chaos and unpredictableness used by people. However then, if these spaces are not designed or under-designed for amenities, why not let people make these spaces themselves when they move in? Hold on to your thoughts, I would say. While it might seem like allowing people to build and use these spaces as they see fit seem like the easiest alternative, it is not like community design spaces do not work at all. Let us see a few examples of such design spaces that are used by people. Like the outdoor public gyms that are located strategically, the Varanasi Ghats, where the steps and plinths are definitively organized, but however the nature of activities introduced in such spaces are vastly varied, from people sitting along the ghats to view the river, or to people setting up their stalls and shops as and when required and remote. The Dhobi Ghats, where there is a defined structure of the water system and the ghats and the wash stones that are designed here. But the people using these activities design and organize themselves according to their needs. Or the temporary structure of the school is a temporary assembly where people design and assemble it when they need an enclosed space and remove it when the children want to play outside. When it comes to using these amenities, I think that in designing it, whether it has been under-designed or over-designed, it does work if it is contextually appropriated. So then I would like to pose the question of how relevant do you think a context is for designing such spaces? What is even to be considered as a context, or is it completely being irrelevant for these global cities? With this I would like to pose a question to everyone.
Looking at your presentation, what I felt is that right now we are looking at the kind of spaces that we go for enjoyment as something to be planned for and then doing. So amenities is how we look at it is in the same like that. I'm planning to go there, I will decide it in my day schedule and then I will go for it. But when we look at the places that we want to live in, or the places that are desirable, were all where there was an overlap of activities. The way you showed that people come in, they organize themselves for some occasion, and then they take all of those things back with them and leave the land. So the similar kind of activities used to happen in the older kind of city parts, where people used to do all kind of this festive activities in that same area, in that same locality, and their facades used to change according to that. People used to occupy different parts of facade or verandas to participate, and it was not something which I was deciding and then going and doing or performing. It was just through the activities that was happening. That is exactly what is not there right now when we look at the housing in the city context, which is also again coming from the global or international standards, that there would be certain festivals that are happening somewhere and we go and participate in them. We dedicate few days to do those kind of activities, and that is where I think that monotonous wala thing starts happening, that I feel where my life is monotonous, and then to make it not monotonous, I opt for these activities. While before maybe I feel that it was actually a very integral part of me being. to get involved in these activities. But then why is this not happening today is because we are falling for a lot of other factors. Like we are very much concerned that a security guard should be there at the gate. No other person should enter the premise. And our context is actually becoming a very internal kind of development that is being done in the housing instead of responding to what is happening. And then a lot of this internal self-contextualized buildings coming together to again form those streets, and then this notion of participating or performing is what goes on.
I think also I believe that, like for example, whenever we start setting certain boundaries for our context, we do unintentionally sometimes also bring in other factors. Like for example, if we are bringing in a security guard to divide our demarcation of the context, the vendors come in when we have to come in into the complex, so there are other, like a person who does this fee comes in and gets things. So we do bring in changes or other things also that starts influencing our context. Or even in terms of designing of amenities itself. Like right now at the housing complex, at least I largely believe that they have these manicured gardens or these very curvy paths that just seem to be the character of what an amenity is expected to be. But when people have festivals, they do celebrate it within the same place, but they start using other, like the driveways become these spaces, but they are not designed and therefore have that nature or factor at least to enable the activity of the festivals to happen, which an amenity should be.
It is happening because developer is selling it as and showing it to you as a desire that you want to have or you may have, and people are buying it for that. But in reality, while they are using the spaces, it is for totally different purposes, which is not addressed by any one of them. Not even the user is considering it while buying. So that's why it's never a part of our.
That's what I was trying to. That's why the distinction of the ads also has been done, because maybe our users not able to separate themselves from the utopia that is created by these images and advertisements, or do they not actually desire it? That was a question that was also.
But I'm sure that project that you showed, where there is ballet dancing or a place to jam, for example, I'm sure the user knows that they are not going to do ballet dancing, right? That it's too tough to do, or play squash for that matter. Yeah? But maybe it is just, like you're saying, it is aspiration, right? I want to show that I live in a project where there's a ballet dancing room or aspiration room. So it's just so I would say that it is, a lot of times, a lot of users are also aware of a lot of things, but there is a lot at play here. I want to tell people that I live in a housing society which has a swimming pool, which has a squash court, which has Zen garden. So I'm just doing it for social bragging rights, isn't it? That I also know I'm not going to use it, everyone knows. So it's like some sort of a
mirror that you're just creating.
So in a way, if you're saying that in that project actually the ballet room was never made, maybe that is one way to go ahead. Let us advertise and let us put on Instagram that I have a swimming pool, but it's just a 3D visualization done by an architect, and the actual project is something else. And I don't invite people to my house. So everyone plays this charade of, okay, I have this, and then do something completely different. Because I have also seen so many housing societies where the swimming pool is not filled. It's too costly to maintain. So the developer is giving it, if the developer doesn't give it, the people ask for it. But the key thing is they are not asking for it because they want to swim. There will be few people who are asking for it. But bulk of it are asking it just because they want to showcase or tell people.
then now that this has been set, then it will have a certain list of expectations, like the swimming pool. Then now what do we do? Like if we don't give, the developer would want us to give, and then if we give, then this is what ends up happening.
And in that also, I think, like in terms of context, like for example, in a city like when I talk to people also how they use amenities. In a city like Mumbai, where people use, there's a larger percentage of people that tend to use these amenities compared to like the advertisement I shown was of Coimbatore. So there, the swimming pool has never been used by people until like some summer vacation when children have to play. So maybe in terms of the relevance, in terms of the identifying like what is the urban lifestyle of each urban city maybe, and like what are the nitty-gritty urban cultural activities that happen within the region, maybe just picking that up would also be beneficial. And like for example, a pharmacy card, it might seem like an aspirational quality for anyone, but if you introduce it in another context, it does not become functionally relevant for the space.
So what would your reading be of a truly Ahmedabadi evening? What would be anyone, or can you think of an Ahmedabadi evening?
I'm thinking mainly large open ground. So there's a lot of festive events that happen throughout the year, and we require, and maybe temporary. I was thinking this even during design exercise, like because temporary structures don't get counted under FSI when amenities are. And if we are saying Ahmedabadi mentality is of that cost effectiveness, then why not have temporary structures that can shift between enclosed and non-enclosed spaces, so that caters to requirements of amenities that needed. Like a swimming pool maybe becomes a skating ring throughout the year, or just with different slopes that people can use as like just for playing, and you just want to slope down and all. But then again, get filled with water if people actually find the relevance in the requirements.
But having some new boundaries, which you explained in the previous slide, like in Kumbh, so that example, that can easily loosen up to 5 to years, and these open spaces are like phase of the entire project, and it is filled with parking. So it will, the entire picture of the picturesque thing, phase of the building, the phase of the project will lose the value.
You mean to say if we provide open ground, it will get used for
use boundaries, kind of, which can be acted as a multi-purpose kind of place.
I think in that way, I would also say another aspect is that parking right now in housing projects also they cater to the minimum FSI requirement of areas, and not regarding whether the houses there would actually, like for example, the higher affordable, like the HIG houses, the areas where people would be expected like that, there would be two cars and maybe more than that also in a house. So maybe then if we start providing those necessary requirements according to the users, then the other spaces would get used for recreation and other communal spaces perhaps. Anyway, we do sell all of these when it comes to per square feet, so then why not? It's also a question I'm posing.
When you say just by providing a large open space, where is our role as an architect? Anybody can sort of, I mean, there's nothing to create in an open space.
When I say not designing, I was just thinking that at any point, whatever you do, it doesn't become a non-design because you're doing something to make sure, like for example, I'll just take you through this. Like for example, this is a non-design leftover space that comes in between, but the location of it in terms of placing of how the house is open towards it and all ensures that children are being safe, they can feel that safety, and parents ensure that they are safe enough to play there. So why not we leave like these are voids, like maybe we design the masses around it such that that becomes a utilitarian space predictably or it is not that, I mean, it's not like these design spaces are not completely relevant for every place. There are few many places, many cities, or many particular projects within the city which use it very efficiently. But maybe just we consider the relevance of it at all scales and all places.
But I think if we start with asking, okay, what do we want to do immediately outside our house? That we don't know what that amenity is, let's not give a name to begin with. But I'm going outside my house and I'm doing something, right? And there it could either be a planned thing or an unplanned thing. So what do you think we want to do outside our houses? Which is not like going far away, but I just walk out of my house a few steps and I want to do something. What would that something be? Because if there's nothing we can think of, then we don't need it.
It depends on the different age groups.
Yeah, fair enough. So we can talk of all kinds of people. So if you're, say, a 5-year-old, if you're a 10-year-old, 20-year-old, maybe different age groups want different things. But if you could make a list of that, and I think in terms of, so when you are showing that other space as compared to this space, when you are saying design and non-design, maybe it is, when we think of that activity, maybe we will be able to arrive at design parameters which might not necessarily be scale, proportion, materiality or tectonic, it may be something else. I think we'll get a clue only if we define instances of what it is.
The issue is with that informality is something which is not into this, inserted into this. Basically, when I'm living in a house, if my parent is going outside for a walk, they go with a target that they want to buy this things also. And then they will leave the society, they will have a store and then they will buy those things and then they come. This is exactly this flexibility of doing different tasks at that one moment while also interacting with people is something which happens in a non-gated kind of community. But when we talk about such a huge kind of housing, where the commercials are always on the street, where we have to go onto streets separately, crossing the boundary of that security people, and then go out, that is something where I have to make a decision that now I have to go out. That doesn't happen that smoothly. So I think after a certain scale of when the units are increased in number, that informality should be inserted into the program itself, into this amenity kind of area. Because this seems so purposeless that why would anyone like to just move around over here for what?
So do you say like if there is, let's say, a shop probably introduced within this part of the amenities, then is that
shops, restaurants, grocery shops, everything. Like, just imagine putting all of those things into this, and then this right now that there is no human. And even I think it's a good fair day where people could be outside, but they are not.
I feel like we are shifting our focus of just the housing thing to a mixed use sort of typology.
But if I look at both extremes, so one extreme would be say to say that let there be no building types in the city, let there be a completely sort of mixed use, where commercial, residential are not segregated. Only maybe things which are polluting or something of that sort or hazardous for the time being, let's say factories are placed away. But one imagination is a completely sort of mixed use at floor level, at building level. There is no school, there is no hospital, there is no civic center. But I'm just giving an extreme. And the other extreme example is to say that no, keep houses separate in a separate area. Even to buy a small thing, you have to walk maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes for school, for office. Home is a home and the residential environment is purely, you want to play a game, you please go to a garden. It should be outside. And now we are operating between these two extreme scenarios, and I think what we are not able to come to a conclusion or agreement with is that where do we want to place ourselves? There is some value to complete mixing up, but there is some value to complete segregation also. Or are we saying that there are some activities which should be put with housing and some which should be intentionally found? And my sense is it will come only if we start maybe listing down what is it. Why do you want to get out of your home if you don't want to buy something from a shop, which also you don't need to get out of your home these days? Why do you want to get out of it? Let's imagine a scenario where I never leave my home. Never, ever. Because like after COVID, hospitals started giving that service, right? Where you can be in hospital in your home. You buy a package and the nurse will come and doctor will come telling us this, that. So even hospital at home, school online at home, you never get out of. Yeah. I think we should ask these questions. Just imagine what do you see as the downside of that?
You don't have fresh, like you don't, I mean you also need some healthy lifestyle in terms of going out and need fresh air and physically.
We'll get fresh air at home. Do you know someone is bottling English air in bottles and selling them at an exorbitant cost? You can buy a bottle of English countryside air. It will come to Ahmedabad. You open it and you and it's available and it's costly. I'm amazed whether people purchase it.
You're buying it.
Yeah, but you're getting fresh English countryside air. Sitting at home, you don't need to visit England. You won't be scared. Definitely use pipelines which will transport air. For some time before this CNG rickshaws became the norm in Ahmedabad, on CG Road at Panchwati, actually the traffic police had a huge problem. They were breathing so much carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. So at Panchwati they set up an oxygen facility for policemen. You can go in and there's an oxygen bottle and for 20 minutes you breathe pure air and then you go back to the crossroads and breathe all the fumes. So everything can come to your house. You don't have to. Frankly speaking, I enjoy the benefit of Big Basket or Zomato or Instamart. Right? घर पे आता है, why go out? So fresh air also you get. Interaction, you do voice call. But maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe already all of you guys are old and so you feel that, no, I want physical contact. Like your grandparents might be saying something else which you don't agree with. Maybe the young kids today will say, big deal, instead of meeting face to face and meeting online. Then why do you need it? I think we are old. No physical contact.
I think there is still some relevance of that. I mean, maybe there's a larger percentage of you of us wanting that virtual connection so you can stay in your personal private space. But there is still that you would still have to see someone in your day to make sure that you feel like you're there in the real world. Maybe.
I think nothing can replace nature. So, no matter what
Watch
you
it on
buy.
TV.
No, I feel that.
Take that bottle of fresh forest air, sleep it and watch it. No, the question being asked is, I completely agree. But what if someone says, you are incapable of acquiring the same experience by watching it on TV, you feel that you need to physically go to nature to enjoy it. It's your limitation. Like, my mother would say that she doesn't read e-books. She says that no, I want the physical book. Maybe some of you still do, but I know a lot of people for whom they say that I am going on a plane or I am traveling, I can carry 100 books in Kindle or on my phone. Why do I need physical book? The font is same. So, is the problem in the e-book or the real book, or is it your limitation that for you it is not the same? In society might progress, or not progress, but change. And for someone, physical book or e-book doesn't make a difference. You are nostalgic about smell of the book and physical turning of pages and whatnot. I'm sure your grandparents have some nostalgia which you don't have. Like grind your own spices. Don't you think we all should be buying and grinding our own spices? Or making soap, manufacturing soap at home? Or manufacturing pickles at home? Now some of your grandparents will be doing it. How many of you make pickles at home? You will say, I will just find a good pickle manufacturer and purchase it. So every generation puts their limits. This is non-negotiable. I don't know, I'm just asking all of you.
And I'm just thinking that if, like right now, there are both e-book, like in that context, there are both e-books and printed books.
Yes.
So therefore, both are there, both people are there, and they're getting a choice towards it. Like in a similar context, if social interactive spaces are completely obliterated because a majority are not seeking it, then there would be no choice for the people who actually want to see. I'm sure there will be always exceptions. So then that choice is being removed, or then should we provide the space and be okay with the fact that not everyone are using it, but at least the people who need it are able to use it.
No, that is a fair point. It's just the degree that you have to think of, isn't it? What if a person likes ice skating? One person in this entire housing society. So provide an ice skating ring because someone wants it. Then you will say, no, it is, why don't you, there is a ice skating public ring somewhere. It's ridiculous to provide for one, so let there be one somewhere in the city. That could be I'm saying but you are right, when you give the example of an e-book and physical book, you are saying that give both and let people do. The question right now we are asking is what will come in this immediate open space and what you can give at the city level. Because someone could argue, for example, if I club all these small gardens that are there in all housing societies and give one central park kind of garden in the city, because that is what I can give. I can remove all of these small chunks and give a big chunk. Now which one would you rather have? If you look at New York, it is like that. If you look at individual housing level, there are no gardens. But then you get a central park. Or you have these small gardens. And then small gardens are also nice. I'm not trying to say that they have their own charm. But I think the question is at what scale or in what context do you want to provide? That's the question you were also asking, right? That contextual. So I will just add this question of scale which eventually becomes context, that should it be in the context of individual housing societies or should it be a larger, like swimming pool for example. So many housing societies are providing swimming pool. Maybe if you have 5,000, 10,000, if it's a Godrej Garden City or a Dani Shanti Gram, maybe you provide one, maybe it is big enough a population. But should that project have a swimming pool? But otherwise, I think what you showed in the beginning, I think the ad was quite something, had everything in it. And Zen Garden, Tranquility, had a 50-year, it's the same project.
The same project.
So it said there is a 50-year-old Ganesh temple under a peepal tree. And then you showed a Ganesh, they were doing puja of Ganesh which was not under a peepal tree.
Yeah, yes, that was.
Which is, how did that happen? But actually a lot of ads nowadays are like this. They are like this. Yoga and gym. Yeah, yoga, everything was there in this scheme. You wouldn't have to go out at all. You could live your life.
There's a grocery store also inside the complex.
See?
So,
what is interesting is the modernist, the Vienna experiments, they were also doing the gym, kitchen, and common expression, and complementarities was such a modernist break in some sense.
Yeah.
It's completely flipped in its meaning in today's times. Today's nobody wants to be. There are also kind of thinks about what is the civic sense that as a general population has. What's the context there? For example, why do, even though the taxes are higher in Europe, you get a lot more generous public services. Versus, let's say you go to US, where the taxes are also higher, but there is no public. Because the civic sense is different. Where let's say there's each person for himself or herself in US. The European dream is to kind of create this sort of quote unquote common space where many could coexist. Here, the question of coexistence in India is a very slightly different, for example. So the question of providing big parts fails in some sense. And even the podiums and the common amenities people don't use. So you wonder where the publicness also is in many places. Is it along the street edges? It's a very strange phenomenon in some sense where you can't really box it and say the podium open space is good or the common open space is good or the central park is so we are a society which has not defined what that shared space means for let's say for urban living.
Yeah, actually this ties to what we were discussing in the morning, that specifically we were talking of Ahmedabad where we were discussing that in Ahmedabad if I want to go outside my house, I don't know where to go.
Yeah.
When if I feel like going out, I either have to think of a restaurant or a mall or there's literally no imagination of what is that public space or what it could also be. The only cities, I feel that cities which have a big natural sort of feature like a beach for example, they still have this notion, but in other cities it becomes a very tricky thing. But at least some cities, like I see that Bangalore, although it is reducing, at least they feel that they will go to Lal Bagh or Kabul Bagh, to them that is one.
That's also far.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying that it is not. One is that city level thing where everyone thinks that oh we should go there. But other than that, I think there is such a dearth of even an imagination of
exactly.
I'm just thinking that I step out. I'm just thinking of my own life and me. Of all instances that I step out of the front door of my house, and the moment I step out, what is my plan? When I step out of the front. am I ever stepping out of the front door of my house without a plan of where I will go, knowing fully well that I will find something? I can't think of an instance where I open the front door of my house without thinking what I am going to do. So that in some ways, every instance of walking out of the front door is very purposeful, and in many cases is some sort of either a job or you're going for entertainment. I'm trying to think of when was the last time I walked out of the front door of my house and came back without spending a rupee. Whether for auto or whether to buy something. I went out and I came back in without spending. Which is a strange phenomenon. Which in a way is a complete inversion. I mean, the word oikos, when Aristotle terms it as the home, and we get the word economics from oikos because the oikos was considered the economic unit of the house, where all production happens. And now actually, there is no money made in the house. I'm going out of the house and spending, all transactions are happening outside the house. And in that context, what is an amenity? It is also fascinating. Like I live in a non-gated community. It's a old Gujarat Housing Board scheme, so there are no gates. But that also means there are no private amenities. Which in today's context, if a builder does that, you will not be able to sell any apartments, right? You need all of that to sell. But people are fine with it. I mean, of course, it would have been great to have a children's play area or whatever. But there are so many people who are living in old housing societies which are non-gated. And I think the moment that it is non-gated, you are forced to think of amenities from a very different perspective. So if I now look at gated communities, and why do they not remove the gate? Their worry is that their amenities will get destroyed. So all the amenities that we have in gated housing societies today demand a lot of maintenance. And the only reason why I am not allowing anyone else, I am leaving the gate open is because I am scared of what will happen. Somewhere that goes against the very definition of a public space, that you should not be afraid of it getting vandalized or destroyed. So our non-gated housing society also has a ground in front. There's nothing there, but it's just an open ground. But children are playing on the street. But because it's non-gated, there is nothing fragile in that. In terms of amenities, there is nothing fragile. I think that gated communities are always fragile. They have to be protected from people.
Our own city public spaces which are provided by our taxes are being shut down.
Yes, like
why would I? My personal
like riverfront is being policed and shut down. You are right.
That question will seep into every sector of.
Yes. So it is weird. I mean, who are we protecting it from, right? If we are shutting it down from ourselves, we are shutting it down.
Have you seen it after 7 or 8 after sunset?
Sorry.
Have you seen it after sunset? The riverfront. The entire the youngsters are doing TDA or display of affection.
That is the reason why it gets shut down.
Yes. Civic sense is.
So like
So
we are
actually
also
we need
deciding
lot of-
on to what is to be done and what is not to be done.
Where is the people doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, we need to design more public spaces for PDA.
Like in public, whole like on the bandstand, feel that ceiling. Whole stretch is basically like a PDA. It's so cool. It's like a But the thing is that the houses are so small.
Yeah.
The open spaces, quote unquote, are surveyed all the time.
Even if your houses are big, you bring your boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah, it's also not.
Yeah, it's not culturally acceptable. You can't take them to your bedroom and close the bed with you. Do what you want. So people are not doing PDA because they want to publicly display their affairs. They have no other place. So I don't know what is our imagination of morality and how human beings procreate that we want to sort of say, nowhere will you go.
Bridges become the very
Yeah.
good. In every city there will be some bridge which is so isolated from a lot of these situations that then that becomes the spot of. Then there is so much control in what activities are to be done and what not, and then you call it as public spaces, which in itself doesn't make any sense.
But bridges also, even if it's not for PDA, when you look at Ahmedabad bridges also, like people are all on the, because there's no one, if you want to go somewhere and not spend money, your gardens close down by sunset, most gardens, so you can't go in a garden, then where do you go? There's nowhere to go.
I think I was just thinking about the previous presentation, like how you want a outside space that's not your home, but you also want it controlled like a home, like the public amenities. Even like you said, the housing project advertisement that I showed, like in actuality, there was a proposal where the amenity part can be separated out and made as a part of the outside space and all, but the residents said no because they wanted their own space.
Yes.
So it's like it is a public space for a community, but you're defining a community to within your being controlled about it, that you don't want a certain part.
And also it is actually also designed in a way that if you don't take care of it, very quickly it will run down. Right? So I think in that sense also our design also is very fragile. We don't know how to design public spaces which can take a lot of traffic and abuse, because that's the whole idea of making public space. You don't need to police it. But you're right, in fact I back to the previous presentation, it's a strange situation where that's what why I was saying that we don't want anything to be wild. No form of wilderness, either in terms of nature or human behavior, is acceptable. There shouldn't be anything that is drastic. Everything has to be tempered and well within acceptable limits. So no one wants that other.
In relation to this, actually, I am taking this class with him where he was talking about that before 20 years there was not that much of barricades been put between the public and between the private. There was a lot of free movement that was happening, and the reason why he was saying that what changes is actually you will see the change happening at multiple parts of it, multiple parts where he was talking about if there is a vice chancellor, so there in the Gujarat University their vice chancellor has 24 security guards. So it's like, who are they protecting that vice chancellor from their own students?
Yes.
And over here exactly that is what he was talking about, that's how we are keeping modernity intact in the institution, while we actually go and use the things that are being used by everyone, and that's how the quality of it has been improved. And I feel that is exactly what changes, because this public spaces is something which only a specific class of citizens are using. while lot of citizens have choices, or who are, so a developer who is earning crores of rupees out of this project is actually never going to use this. He is never actually going to leap into this place. He can go and enjoy himself, his family could go and enjoy themselves abroad, from where they are bringing his aspirations and putting it onto the people. So when there is going to be this class discrimination, it's kind of a discrimination where they have that opportunity to go out, but a lot of people are going to use it, and this is something which is imposed onto them. They even don't realize that, and post certain period of time, it actually becomes a thing that it has to be accepted by everyone, and now everyone is using it. Like, it's because of maybe modernization, but actually modernization someone is not vouching for modernization because it is not helpful for the elites, and then all of these things are going on. Like the example that I was giving about Matchbox is like the quality of Matchbox is constantly degrading because actually no one is actually using that Matchbox. Only the people who have to like extremely poor people who could not afford gas are using that Matchbox, and like no one now cares about Matchbox anymore. That's why. So something like very consciously that modernity needs to be.
So in that matchbox analogy, are you saying one could also talk about are increasingly people not using or not wanting some kind of public space because they get access to it somewhere else, and therefore then if it is only meant for a certain section of society, no one is capable.
Also, it is not in my benefit to give it to you, so I won't give it to you. It is that. So if I keep the Sabarmati riverfront open, it is not going to benefit me as a ruler or me as an organization. So I'm not going to keep it open. And then the people don't have power to fight against it. While the people who understand this may have the power to fight, but then they lack the will to do it.
Yeah, I think to me the very clear-cut example of this is that I think most people who have a swimming pool in their housing society, most, not all, can afford to go to Karnavati or Rajpath Club. And the people who don't have swimming pool in their house cannot afford to go to that. So those who are getting it twice, and those who are not getting it are never getting it. Because the moment you put a swimming pool and a gym, your monthly maintenance cost is so high that only some people can afford that, to live in that kind of a neighborhood. And if you can afford to pay that much maintenance fees to maintain a swimming pool and a gym, you will go to a Talwalkar's or some other gym. You will not go to your housing gym because that will provide you even better exercise machines, right? It will give you a personal trainer. So it's like a curious sort of catch-22 situation we are in there. If you provide it, it's beyond the reach of people who need it.
That's a good set of public.
It has a good set of public swimming pools and sports, not so much, but yes. But that's where I think it's very weird that AMC is right now, because it has this crazy dream of bidding for the Olympics. Naranpura. So right next to where I live, there is a aquatic center which has a synchronized swimming pool. That is being done for 6 days of a hopeful event in 2036. I think in 2036 for a few days, someone is going to do synchronized swimming there. And in 2023, that pool is being built. And as of now, the AMC has said that no locals will be allowed to use that sports facilities till the Olympics is over, because their fear is, so it has squash courts, it has tennis courts, a normal swimming pool and a synchronized swimming, I think diving pool and synchronized, something of that sort. But they are saying that till the Olympics happens, no one can use it. My fear is that by 2036, if no one is using it, it will anyways become invented. So, unfortunately now we are going in a direction where we are building facilities, sports facilities. You could actually open it up to public, charge some fees and make it usable, but our fear is that public will destroy it. Of course, on the other side, I should say that it's not completely unfounded as well. So if I go back to this question of civic sense, I think apathy is very high in Indian societies today. If I look at any public amenity, people's attitude towards it is very poor, generally by and large. Civic sense is like degrading. If I look at it over the decades, civic sense, I don't know about other cities, Ahmedabad I can be sure of that. Civic sense is continuously going down.
People cut out from the same pieces are coming here in fragments, right? And those are people saying who are using these places.
Yes.
We are not vandalizing it because it is open to us and we understand the value of it. So exactly this is something which is not reflected. That's why maybe the vandalization happens.
Yeah. So we need to get, what you're saying is we need to get to the root cause of why people are vandalizing or not taking care of public amenities, instead of just trying to police it further and say. So again, tying it to our morning discussion, so our problem is that we see a problem and then we want a quick solution, and more often than not we are trying to solve the symptom. Vandalizing is happening, shut the riverfront at 8 o'clock. Don't allow people in that swimming pool, squash court, there will be no vandalism. But that's such a weird sort of response. We need to find out why people are and address that root cause. One hopes that by and large most people by nature don't have such a poor civic sense or such a sense when it comes to their own house or the space immediately outside our house. I have seen, in my own housing society, so many times fight happens that municipal sweeper is sweeping and he is temporarily making like a heap. And everyone is saying, don't make it in front of my house. उसके घर के सामने करो चलेगा, मेरे घर के सामने नहीं. So everyone's civic sense radius is limited to like 20 meters outside my house. And outside that is free for all. That radius we need to increase. Okay, I think we'll have to move on to